North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact. We point out bias. We make commentary. And then we debate. That's what we do here. Let me flesh that out for you just a little bit. The news and the facts often are not close company. We point that out. Bias is a fact of life in these United States for this particular mainstream media. It doesn't make a difference whether it's left or right. Bias is always bad. We point that out. I make commentary. That's not news. My commentary is not the news. My commentary is simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours. That leads us to debate. We debate the commentary, we debate the news, we debate where we're going, and that's the Wells Report. And I want to thank you very much for being with us today. For those of us who lived through the 9/11 attacks, yesterday was a very satisfying day to find out that the latest top Al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, is dead. This radio broadcast began on 9/11/2001. I was tapped by my radio station to handle a show to explain what happened that day. And I discovered that my life had changed like so many other Americans. And I realized that there was no way that I was going to be able to continue my career as a happy-go-lucky radio personality talking about things that you would chat about around a water cooler at work. I realized I had to start doing the news because I wasn't going to waste another moment of your time. I have done that broadcast ever since, over 20 years now. I also have decided to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. I came to Texas, found out about the Texas State Guard, and joined. It is a part of the Texas Military Department, but none of the things I say on this broadcast have anything to do with the policies and ideologies of the Texas Military Department or the Texas State Guard. But I decided that what I was going to do was serve. And I had a chance, and I took it. With the idea in mind that should another attack like that happen, I was not just going to be sitting there watching it unfold on television. I was going to do my dead level best to be a part of the necessary American military response. And that was 14 years ago. Man, time flies. I just put those numbers together and I realized I've been doing this for a long time. The scum responsible for that attack have paid dearly with their lives, in fact. And another one has been taken out. President Biden stepped to a microphone yesterday and said justice has been delivered and this terrorist leader is no more. The strike occurred at 9:48 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday night. It is the first known U.S. attack in Afghanistan since President Biden ended America's 20-year war there last August. Al-Zawahiri, 71 years old, was standing on the balcony of a safe house in downtown Kabul. That's a real city. He wasn't tucked away in some small town in Pakistan or hiding in the mountains or any of that. He was right downtown. He was hit by 2 missiles, according to a senior administration officials who discussed the attack with reporters on condition of anonymity. The strikes killed al-Zawahiri, the most senior leader of Al-Qaeda since 2001, and no one else, including civilians. It was a breathtaking display of American technological military might. U.S. intelligence also points out that none of al-Zawahiri's family members were present at the time of the attack. He was hit by a Hellfire missile. It is air to ground. It is laser guided. It is a subsonic missile. It weighs 108 pounds and apparently was filled with very sharp pieces of steel that sliced through al-Zawahiri and ended his life. President Biden, speaking from a White House balcony as he recovered from a rebound case of COVID-19, called al-Zawahiri the mastermind for decades of attacks against the U.S. He was bin Laden's top deputy during the 9/11 terror attacks in 2001, helped carry out the 2000 bombing of the USS Cole and the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. He carved a trail of murder and violence against American citizens, American service members, American diplomats, and American interests. People around the world no longer need to fear the viciousness of this determined killer. This, by the way, is USA Today's copy of this. The president hailed the mission as a total success, said it was carefully planned to minimize risks to civilians. Biden and other officials were first briefed on al-Zawahiri's location in April. The president learned of the proposed Operation July 1, signed off on it after a July 25 meeting with top advisors. After carefully considering clear and convincing evidence of his location, I authorized the precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all. Al-Zawahiri's death delivers a significant blow to the group's ability to operate, including against the U.S. homeland. This from the official who was speaking on condition of anonymity. Biden said al-Zawahiri was continuing to provide strategic direction to the vast terrorist network and made videos calling for future attacks against the United States. For several years, the U.S. has been aware of a network giving protection to al-Zawahiri. According to the official, this year, U.S. intelligence revealed that al-Zawahiri's wife, daughter, and her children had been relocated to a safe house in Kabul, where al-Zawahiri himself was later identified. The president said this: "No matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out." President Biden said that he hopes that al-Zawahiri's death can bring one more measure of closure to family members of 9/11 victims. Thankfully, I was not a 9/11 victim, nor did I know anybody directly who passed away on that attack. But my relief is substantial today. My pride in the American idea of we will not falter, we will not fail, we will not tire, to take these people out has been renewed. And I feel good about it today. Joe Biden was the vice president when the U.S. killed Osama bin Laden in 2001 during the Obama administration. Saturday's drone strike came nearly 1 year after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war that was launched in response to the 9/11 attack. The Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in the midst of the U.S. exit last August. Senior Taliban leaders were aware of al-Zawahiri's location, said a U.S. official, calling it a clear violation of the Trump-era agreement under which the Taliban agreed to sever ties with al-Qaeda in exchange for the U.S. withdrawal of troops. Although he kept a low profile for most of the last 25 years, U.S. officials never gave up the hunt for Zawahiri, an Egyptian physician and eye surgeon by training who started as bin Laden's mentor when the two met in Afghanistan in the 1990s. For years, the two worked hand in glove to build out al-Qaeda's global terrorist reach and capabilities, with bin Laden acting as the public face of the organization, Zawahiri a master strategist with a deep understanding of Islamic theology. Zawahiri was initially more influential than bin Laden, serving as the leader of the Islamic Jihad of Egypt, a terror group responsible for the 1981 assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Zawahiri spoke much better English than bin Laden, and over the years did a lot behind the scenes to unite and keep together the various al-Qaeda factions. Senator Joni Ernst, a combat veteran who sits on the Armed Services Committee, hailed the announcement. Al-Zawahiri has the blood of far too many U.S. service members and innocent civilians on his hands. But some longtime U.S. counterterrorism officials downplayed the significance of the strike, saying that al-Zawahiri over the years had never really stepped into the void left behind after the U.S. killed bin Laden, Al Qaeda's founder and the man who had united many terrorist groups under the Al Qaeda banner in the late 1990s. As a result, Al Qaeda lacks the same Al Qaeda lacks the same top-down organizational structure it had before bin Laden's death more than a decade ago, with at least 5 affiliates around the world now operating largely independently of each other, and the core Al Qaeda elements still residing in Afghanistan, according to Javed Ali, a senior national security counterterrorism official in the Trump administration, who tracked al Zawahiri and other Al Qaeda leaders for decades. This is a continuation of the long-standing U.S. effort to decimate Al Qaeda over the last 20 years, and while al Zawahiri had taken over the reins a decade ago, he never held the same status as bin Laden. He was more of a caretaker, not a visionary, said Ali, who spent 16 years in the top national security positions in the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. It was al Zawahiri who wrote the 1998 manifesto that killing Americans and their supporters anywhere in the world is, quote, an individual duty for every Muslim who can do it in every country in which it's possible to do it. 3 years later, he played a key role in helping bin Laden oversee the suicide hijackings, which were conceived and orchestrated by a close Pakistan ally, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who, by the way, is still in U.S. custody and for some reason is still breathing. I don't understand that. Al Zawahiri's role in 9/11 wasn't highlighted as much as bin Laden's and Mohammed's by the 9/11 Commission and other investigative bodies, but his leadership of the strong contingent of Egyptians that had come to Afghanistan to join Al Qaeda helped provide operational skill, organizational know-how, and financial expertise to carry out the attacks. Ringleader and lead hijacker of the 9/11 plot, Mohammed Atta, was a fellow Egyptian, and so were many of the top commanders of the organization that pledged their allegiance to al Zawahiri. That was the USA Today take on that. Fox News is a little bit more biased. Keep this in mind. President Biden is taking a victory lap after U.S. forces killed Al Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, despite previously opposing military operations targeting terrorist leaders. Biden told the American public during a televised address Monday the U.S. drone strike had killed the 71-year-old terror leader in Afghanistan. To those around the world who continue to seek to harm the United States, hear me now. We will always remain vigilant, and we will act. We will always do what is necessary to ensure the safety and security of Americans at home and around the globe. And then Fox News points out that those comments varied sharply with the tone he took previously when it came to targeting terrorists. Biden lambasted former President Trump for ordering the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, that while he was running for the White House in 2020. No American will mourn Qasem Soleimani's passing. He deserved to be brought to justice for his crimes against American troops and thousands of innocents around the region. He supported terror and sowed chaos, said Biden. None of that negates the fact that this is a huge escalatory move in an already dangerous region. He also famously was against the attack on Osama bin Laden. Fox News points that out as well. There is more. We will bring it to you as we just get underway here on the Wells Report. I'm John David Wells. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. What are your thoughts on the end of Ayman al-Zawahiri? Give us a call. Was just reading up on the Hellfire RX missile that took him out. They fired 2 at him. It deploys 6 blades, which fly through the air and destroy anything in their path. And, oh, by the way, it is a localized weapon, and the precision of that munition is obvious. It's truly an amazing weapon. Politico reports the story this way. The United States killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri in a drone strike over the weekend. An operation that included tracking him down through his family, according to senior administration officials. The strike, carried out by a CIA-operated drone, occurred at 6:18 a.m. Sunday, local time in Kabul, as the al-Qaeda leader stood on the balcony of his house. A person familiar with the operation separately said it took a few days to confirm the killing because the U.S. doesn't have many assets on the ground in Afghanistan. As you know, we pulled out of there pretty quickly in August of last year. Zawahiri never received the household name status of his predecessor, Osama bin Laden, but his killing is nonetheless a major win for the United States in the ongoing struggle against Islamic terrorism, especially as the United Nations warns the terror group is outpacing its peers like Islamic State as a long-term global threat. In a speech announcing the operation, President Joe Biden said he gave the final approval to kill al-Zawahiri, who was still planning attacks against the U.S. and his allies and our allies. Justice has been delivered. The terrorist leader is no more. Minutes before that address, a senior administration official spoke to reporters on how Zawahiri was found, hunted, found, then killed. This year, we identified Zawahiri's family, his wife, his daughter, and her children, relocated to a safe house in Kabul. We then identified al-Zawahiri at the location in Kabul through layering multiple streams of intelligence. The terrorist leader's habit of standing on his balcony allowed the U.S. observers to observe him and confirm his identity. The president received updates on the development of the target throughout May and June, said the senior official, and on July 1st, Biden received a briefing on the proposed operation in the White House Situation Room. CIA Director William Burns, Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, among others, were at that meeting. The strike ultimately carried out at 9:48 p.m. Eastern Time on July 30th by an unmanned aerial vehicle. 2 Hellfire missiles were fired at Zawahiri. Only Zawahiri was killed in the strike. There's no evidence of any other loss of life. When President Obama announced the death of Osama bin Laden, I cried. I was so very happy that our nation had followed through on a promise made by George W. Bush. Likewise, while I'm not nearly as emotional, the years and the things that have happened since have steeled my resolve on that. I am very happy that this man is gone. I'm also very happy that the United States did it in such a brilliantly superb, precise way. Now, I said a long time ago that you were going to have to just kill these people. One steps up and says, I'm the leader. Boom. Who's next? And who's next? And who's next? Al-Zawahiri stayed out of sight for 25 years. And then we found him. And also, I want to point this out. Early in the morning, local time in Kabul, doubtless, immediately after he finished his prayers, that was a human touch for an inhuman being. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. There is crime all across our nation. It is a self-inflicted state of affairs. We have made it possible for people to run in the streets and do as they please. Something in the name of what is called social justice. We'll get to that coming up in just a couple of moments. There is a debate circumstance on this, and I hope you avail yourself of it. Is it a chance for you to reach out to me directly? And you can do that by chat. You can go to YouTube, you can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter and Twitch, and by all means, please do join us today. An 80-year-old California liquor store owner was caught on video taking out robbers who appeared with rifles. He had a shotgun. They walked in. They told him to put his hands up, and he brought his shotgun to bear and fired. The three left the store immediately. One with an outcry of, "He shot my arm off." He's in critical but stable condition now. All of the robbers were picked up at the hospital nearby. The act of self-defense happened early Sunday at the Norco Market and Liquor in Norco, just east of Los Angeles, after the store owner was confronted by a gunman wielding a rifle. In this case, a lawfully armed member of our community prevented a violent crime and ensured their own safety while being confronted with multiple armed suspects, according to the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. Surveillance footage obtained by Fox 11 LA showed the masked suspect pointing a rifle at the store owner moments before the owner reached behind the counter, grabbed a shotgun, and fired in the suspect's direction. It's interesting that this is where we point out bias. This was an assault-style weapon. In fact, it was an AR-15. But it wasn't called that. It was simply called a rifle. That is instructive. The suspect was then heard screaming, "He shot my arm off," as he ran out the store and a getaway vehicle outside. The 23-year-old gunman, not been publicly identified, was later tracked down at a local hospital, suffering from a gunshot wound consistent with a shotgun blast. He is in critical but stable condition, will be booked into jail upon his release. I wonder if he'll stay there. That is LA District Attorney Gascon, who is the subject of a recall election coming soon. The other men police say were inside the getaway vehicle were also found at the hospital, identified as Justin Johnson, 22, of Inglewood, Jamar Williams, 27, of Los Angeles, and Devon Brodus, 24, of Las Vegas, Nevada. The BMW SUV they were traveling in was reported stolen and found to contain numerous stolen firearms, and now each of those men are facing charges of robbery and conspiracy, are being held in lieu of $500,000 bail, according to the Riverside Sheriff's Office. The 80-year-old store owner, meanwhile, is recovering at a hospital after suffering a heart attack shortly after he defended himself. These stories need to be told. It is my hope the mainstream media will do so. This from Fox News. It has to be pointed out at this particular moment that same Riverside County Sheriff's Office famously denied concealed weapons permits for people of Riverside County. Some 5 million people live there. In the entire county of 5 million, there were some 890 or so concealed weapons permits. That was because of you may issue, a municipality or a police agency may issue a concealed weapons permit if you have a good enough reason. That was struck down by the Supreme Court of the United States just this year. This is how you stop crimes like this. This is how you do it. And for all those people that keep finding problems with good guys with guns, well, they're slowly going to learn along with the criminals. And strangely enough, even in one of the most highly regulated anti-gun states in the United States, that people will find a way to defend themselves in these United States. That's one of them. Meanwhile, there was a priest, or a bishop, moreover, in New York City. He was robbed in the middle of a sermon. He was robbed in the middle of a sermon by a group of guys. He had $1 million of jewelry on his person. And that particular robbery created calls from members of the clergy around New York City for special gun permits for members of religious organizations. During an unrelated press conference announcing the expansion of the city's speed cameras program, something we reported on the Wells Report yesterday, Adams listened to a reporter's question about Bishop Lamore Miller Whitehead's recent calls for pastors and other members of the clergy to be armed in the Big Apple. The reporter noted how Miller Whitehead, who himself has a past of grifting and served prison time for theft and grand larceny, had suggested criminal records should not be considered in issuing special gun permits for clergymen and women. The reporter asked off camera, "Do you think it's a good idea that clergy should get a special dispensation when it comes to gun permits?" Adams responded flatly, "No." He then chuckled, then immediately left the podium to listen closely to another question from someone else, and then returned to the microphone. From Fox News, Audrey Conklin, there are certain U.S. cities that have consistently battled violent crime, particularly homicide, throughout the past 3 decades: Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York City, all run by leftist politicians, every single one of them. Violent stories out of these beloved American cities frequently make news headlines because of local and national concern for their residents and the tourists who frequent those historic areas. Perhaps more light needs to be shed on other cities in the South and Midwest that make national headlines less frequently than the aforementioned cities, but have higher or comparable murder rates, including New Orleans, Birmingham, Alabama, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Cleveland, Rochester, and Atlanta. A compilation of June police data from cities with populations greater than 200,000 by Analytics co-founder Jeff Asher lists the top 31 cities with the highest murder rates in order so far in 2022. New Orleans, number one, with a murder rate of 36.8%. This through June 30th, 2022. Baltimore next at 29.1. That's the murder rate there per 100,000 of any big city in the first half of the year. Birmingham, 28 murders. St. Louis, 27.8. Milwaukee, 19.0. Cleveland, 16.9. Rochester, New York, 16.6. Philadelphia, 15.1. Atlanta, 14.9, and on and on. This is per 100,000. These cities have millions in population. That's the murder rate. On Asher's list, New Orleans has a murder rate of 36.8 per capita so far this year, followed by Baltimore, etc. These numbers only reflect murder numbers halfway through 2022 and will go up for the balance of the year. "I think you can see a trend in increased violence across our country as a whole," said Alabama Fraternal Order of Police President Everett Johnson, talking to Fox News. Birmingham, just based off of per capita murders, I think that falls in line with what's going on in the rest of our country for the past 2 or 3 years. Interesting timing that. That would be the summer of 2020 and the balance of the Biden administration. In 2021, more than a dozen cities reported record homicide numbers following a trend of violence that began in 2020. For example, New Orleans recorded 145 murders as of June 30th. putting it on pace for nearly 300 murders this year, which would put the city's homicide rate at 74.12 per 100,000 people. That rate would dwarf Chicago's 18.26 murders per 100,000, even though the Windy City recorded more murders in 2021 than it had in a quarter century. New Orleans would also rank 9th in homicides among major cities in the world that are not at war, according to 2018 data compiled by the Citizens Council for Public Security and Criminal Justice, a Mexico City-based advocacy group. New Orleans saw murders rise from 119 in 2019 to 201 in 2020. The number continued to climb in 2021, reaching 218. That's an 83% increase over the 2019 numbers. I can't speak for the country, but people in Louisiana certainly know it's one of the most dangerous cities in America, said Darryl Basco, president of the Louisiana FOP, adding that what they see on the news and personally, when they visit the city has made Louisianians aware of the violence in New Orleans. The Big Easy attracts lots of tourists to Louisiana year-round, said Bosco, adding the city's council members and other elected officials need to partner with community organizations to get a handle on violence before it impacts tourism revenue. Basco blamed part of the issue on both Louisiana cities on a progressive-leaning district attorney, difficulty attracting and retaining police officers, the demonization of police officers, a trend that other major U.S. cities are also grappling with since 2020. Again, very interesting timing. 5 hours north of New Orleans in Birmingham, Alabama, police have recorded 74 murders so far this year. According to Birmingham police, that puts the city's murder rate at 35 per capita for the city of more than 210,000. Based on my knowledge of Birmingham and other cities, they have a very lenient bond process, pretty much of a signature bond that lets you back out regardless of the crime. When violent offenders aren't locked away, violence increases, said Everett Johnson, president of the Alabama FOP. I think it's a lenient bond system and a lenient criminal justice system. We currently in Alabama have a good time law that allows offenders back on the street for serving so many days for good behavior. But I think that law is being perverted, he said. He also believes there's a cultural lack of respect for human dignity and human life in cities like Birmingham with high murder rates. There's also a drug culture of Birmingham residents trying to compete with one another that leads to violent crime. St. Louis is high on the list, the most murders per capita in the country, but homicide trends have decreased so far in 2022 by 15% since 2021. St. Louis ranked number 1 in murders per capita in 2020. What ends up happening is that all the things that we say regarding personal self-defense in these United States is true. When seconds count, police are only minutes away. It is something that you can't plan for, nor should you, unless you're willing to do one of two things. Go through the slings and arrows, and there are considerable slings and arrows when it comes to carrying a weapon on your person at all times. You can go through all of that, or if that's not your style, then by all means, start learning how to patch people up. Start learning the important things of beyond first aid. There's something in the U.S. military called Combat Lifesaver. Everything that they teach is essential for everyone to know. Believe it or not, you can go to the FEMA website, FEMA.gov, and you can find out more about that. But if you're not interested in carrying a weapon, carry a first aid kit, a good one. I have 2. I issued one of them to one of my soldiers down on the mission that I just returned from. I gave him that and said, please take care of those troops. Hopefully he hasn't had to use it, but he can. He's a paramedic firefighter and a member of the Texas State Guard. We, the people of the United States, have been given by the framers of this great country the ability to be the first line of defense. We can never let that go. We can never let that go. And when we report these violent interactions between good guys with guns and bad guys with guns, it's for a purpose. That purpose is to make sure that people understand that you are taking a huge risk when you decide to commit crime with a firearm or just commit crime in general. The people of the United States are learning, very much like they learned in 2020, that suddenly you could run in the streets and do as you please. Well, you need to be more careful now. Let's hope it works. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact. We make commentary, and then we debate. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Please join us. We would sincerely appreciate it. Tell us what you think. We were just talking about the demonization of police officers. It was a concerted effort through 2020 and 2021. It has slowly gotten more quiet as more police officers have lost their lives. And we mourn yet another one today. A man accused of fatally shooting an Indiana police officer during a traffic stop had made a song about killing police officers. This according to investigators. Carl Boards II was charged with murder and other crimes a day after Elwood officer Noah Shanavaz was gunned down Sunday morning in Madison County, about 50 miles northeast of Indianapolis. The 24-year-old officer was shot in the head after stopping Board's car. Investigators found 36 rifle bullet casings and damage to the patrol car's hood, windshield, and driver's door. Shanavaz's gun was still in its holster when he was taken to a hospital, according to Richard Clay of the Indiana State Police. Boards is 42 years old. He owns a barber shop in Marion, Indiana. Police went to the shop and interviewed a man who lives in an apartment above the business. The man indicated that Boards made a recorded song making statements that if he was ever caught by police, he would kill them. Meanwhile, New York City Police Department, new NYPD officers were assailed with flying bottles and fists from a group of men trying to detain a man for possession of a firearm after the Dominican Day Parade in the Bronx on Sunday. The incident happened at the intersection of 168th and Sheridan about 3 hours after a man was shot nearby along the parade route. This according to police sources. A group of men was reportedly drinking in the street and blocking traffic. The group included members of a Dominican gang called the Trinitarios. This according to sources. A Twitter user posted a video of the alleged incident and showed officers pin a man on the ground while detaining him for possession of a firearm. Bystanders can be seen in the video confronting the officers. One man in a yellow shirt appears to walk toward the officer, with both raising their fists at each other. It was unclear whether anyone was hit. Bottles were seen being hurled at the officers from off camera. The sound of glass shattering can be heard. Police told the paper that one person was arrested for firearms possession, while at least 5 others were arrested for disorderly conduct. Meanwhile, as I report this, George Soros represents the tone-deaf left, perhaps better than anyone in the world. From Fox News, liberal megadonor George Soros pledged he has no intention of slowing down his donations to progressive district attorneys and dismissed the notion their policies were to blame for crime spikes nationwide. Nobody bothered to ask George Soros, or no one could ask George Soros, what he would blame for the crime spikes nationwide, but he wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, some politicians and pundits have tried to blame recent spikes on crime on the policies of reform-minded prosecutors. The research I've seen says otherwise. The most rigorous academic study analyzing data from 35 jurisdictions shows no connection between the election of reform-minded prosecutors and local crime rates. That's quote. Well, why is it that the people who live in those cities are less convinced of your academic understanding, Mr. Soros? You see, academia is fine in a vacuum. But when that vacuum is removed and real life ensues, it's somewhat different. Soros attempted to make the case that policies implemented by prosecutors he has donated millions of dollars to, including New York City District Attorney Alvin Bragg and Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon, have been popular and effective. For who? Very popular with criminals. But who else? Quote, this agenda includes prioritizing the resources of the criminal justice system to protect people against violent crime. It urges that we treat drug addiction as a disease, not a crime. And it seeks to end the criminalization of poverty and mental illness, said Soros. The goal is not defunding the police, but restoring trust between the police and the policed, a partnership that fosters the solving of crimes. Soros also claimed the idea that we need to choose between justice and safety is false, and argued that public safety will improve if people trust the justice system. It depends on which people you're asking for trust, doesn't it? Violent crime in recent years has generally been increasing more quickly in jurisdictions without reform-minded prosecutors, said Soros. Murder rates have been rising fastest in some Republican states led by tough-on-crime politicians. By the way, I just gave you statistics about crime. The top 5 cities in the United States for murder are all run by leftist politicians. George Soros, in my humble opinion, is a flaming creep. I realize that the freedoms of this nation allow people like George Soros to do the work they do. But sometimes having money to just say F you, having F you money, should not include saying F you to the entire society of the United States. We'll be back with more of the Wells Report in just a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact. We make commentary, and then we debate. The news and the facts, there's a difference. We point that out along with bias. Bias from the left or right is equally destructive. The news is what you need, at least in my humble opinion. And so that's what we do here. We've been doing it for over 20 years. We'll continue for another 20, depending, I hope, on whether or not my brain holds out. Cross your fingers. I know I do. The commentary on this broadcast is not the news. I point that out every chance I get. It's not the news. What I think is what I think. What you think is what you think. I hope that you share your viewpoints, and that's the debate. Join us on chat at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And whatever you do, make sure that you check in with us. If you hear something that you disagree with, share it. I'm nice. Ish. I'm nice. 817-379-2172. Operator is standing by. The speaker has landed in Taiwan. And while politics and her infuriating style has led to a broad gulf between me and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, I'm very pleased that she fended off the idea of not going to Taiwan and showing support for the Taiwanese. I'm glad she went. I agree with it, although I have to admit that when I found out about the trip, I was less than pleased that the Speaker of the House of Representatives was going to make this Asian junket. Not so much because of Taiwan, but because that we only have one president at a time. It's the rest of the Asian tour that she's doing that disturbs me the most. But I'm glad she went to Taiwan. USA Today reports it as follows. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi landed in Taiwan today, a highly anticipated visit that came amid increasingly harsh warnings of Chinese retaliation, the People's Republic of China, and escalating Washington-Beijing tensions. Pelosi landed wearing a face mask, stepped off the plane around 10:50 local time, and posed for photos with a contingent of Taiwanese officials who greeted her on the tarmac, along with hundreds, if not thousands, of Taiwanese. In a statement, the California Democrat noted her visit was the first official trip to Taiwan by a U.S. House Speaker in 25 years. It's actually 24, but let's not quibble. Our congressional delegation's visit to Taiwan honors America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy and American solidarity with 23 million people of that country. It's more important today than ever as the world faces a choice between autocracy and democracy. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement minutes after she landed that condemned her visit as a serious violation of the One China principle that maintains Taiwan as part of China. The statement accuses the U.S. of emboldening separatist forces in Taiwan and warned that Pelosi's visit, quote, has a severe impact on the political foundation of the China-U.S. relations and seriously infringes upon China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is also a change. This change is a welcome one from the bellicose and provocative rhetoric coming out of Beijing and Beijing's official news agencies, the Global Times. There were a lot of things said that were extremely, as I said, provocative. And those have moderated into more of the, shall we say, conventional ways to express displeasure with one country and another. It went on to reinforce the playing with fire idea by saying, quote, these moves, like playing with fire, are extremely dangerous, unquote. Pelosi, who has a long record of tangling with Beijing over human rights, is the highest-ranking American official to visit the self-governing island in 25 years. It's actually 24, but it's 24 and change, so they rounded up. Pelosi's office would not confirm the travel in advance, citing security protocols, but her travel plans leaked amid rampant speculation about the fallout from such a visit. Even after she landed, her office did not release an official itinerary for her stay in Taiwan. But Taiwan's three largest newspapers, citing unidentified sources, said she would spend the night. Taiwan's tallest building, Taipei 101, was lit up with welcome messages for the speaker. Welcome to Taiwan, one message said. Thank you. Last month, President Joe Biden told reporters the military thinks it's not a good idea right now for Pelosi to make the trip. Some in Washington have expressed concern that China could respond by ramping up aggression toward Taiwan. They indeed plan to, and they plan to do that forthwith. More about that coming up. The response will almost certainly include a military component, said M. Taylor Favell, director of the Security Studies Program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, writing in a thread on Twitter. He said China would likely mount a show of force, possibly including live fire exercises and a greater military presence within the Taiwan Strait, along with economic and diplomatic actions targeting the island. Reuters, citing an unnamed source, reported today, that several Chinese warplanes flew close to the median line dividing the Taiwan Strait this morning, and that several Chinese warships have sailed near the line since Monday. China views Taiwan as part of its territory, while Taiwan sees itself as a sovereign country. The U.S. has long embraced a murky middle ground that seeks to support Taiwan without infuriating Beijing. In an op-ed published in the Washington Post after her arrival, Pelosi said her trip should be seen as, quote, an unequivocal statement that America stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom. By traveling to Taiwan, we honor the commitment to democracy, reaffirming the freedoms of Taiwan and all democracies that must be respected. That being said, please understand that Taiwan is the only world democracy that does not enjoy full diplomatic relations with the United States of America. This was part of a deal in the 70s that admitted China, the People's Republic of China, into the United Nations on the proviso that Taiwan be removed. And that's exactly what happened. Pelosi noted that her visit was one of several congressional delegations to Taiwan and said it no way contradicts the longstanding U.S. policy. White House officials also made that point, emphasizing that Pelosi's trip does not change the U.S. stance on Taiwan and saying there's no reason for the visit to cause any escalation. Nothing about this potential visit would change the status quo, and the world should reject any Chinese effort to use it to do so, said John Kirby, the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications at the White House. We will not take the bait nor engage in saber rattling. That being said, the USS Ronald Reagan and its task force group is currently east of Taiwan, watching things very carefully. Kirby noted that other members of Congress have visited Taiwan previously, including earlier this year. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich of Georgia was the last House visitor to the last Speaker of the House to visit in 1997. We've repeatedly said that we oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side. We have said that we do not support Taiwan independence, and we have said that we expect cross-strait differences to be resolved by peaceful means. More than 24 state Republicans released a joint statement after Pelosi's arrival in Taiwan, voicing their support for her visit. Which, by the way, reaffirms yet another good thing about the United States. It's good to see it again, and that is that politics stops at the water's edge. It's essential. It's absolutely essential. The travel is consistent with United States One China policy, to which we are committed. Despite the administration's insistence, the visit does not mark a change in U.S. policy. China has threatened consequences. In a statement today, China's foreign ministry said Beijing, quote, will definitely take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity in response to the U.S. speaker's visit. Any consequences from those steps must be borne by the U.S. side and the Taiwan Independent Separatist Forces, according to the statement. I have long said that politics poisons everything it touches. Politics has a tendency to create a group of people that think they know better than the people that they govern. In my view, any government should be a benevolent one working for the advantages of its people, not for the advantages of itself. I'm a strong advocate for making sure that that does not happen to our country. But yet, every year, it seems to get closer and closer and closer The idea that a ruling class can put themselves and their ideas, some of them delirious, in front of the wants and needs of the American people. In Taiwan, they have, by virtue of the fact that the United States supported the separation of non-communist Chinese from China leaving that country and moving to Taiwan in 1949. And until the move in the 70s that removed Taiwan from the United Nations, it gave them time to build a credible military threat to the People's Republic of China. That country seems to have been very much exercised about the fact that America, albeit at arm's length, is still supporting that nation. We need to do more, not less. We absolutely need to do more, not less. What this trip has done, in my view, what this trip has done, and Nancy Pelosi gets credit for this, is that this trip has shown the Chinese to be less than they were before the trip. We talked an awful lot about how the People's Republic of China would not dictate U.S. foreign policy. And we made that good with Nancy Pelosi's visit to that island. It's hopeful that one of these days the United States president makes a trip there. And I think that at this particular moment, the United States of America needs to take the negative momentum that the Chinese People's Republic has foisted on itself and move forcefully into that region and put them on their back foot when it comes to Taiwan. Communism is what I was alluding to before. Communism and totalitarian rule, autocratic ideology, is a diminishment of the people in favor of a ruling class that believe they're simply smarter, better equipped to handle whatever comes up, absent the people, except, of course, for the work that they impose on them. And that is evil. It's evil, just plain and simple. The people of Taiwan have long cherished their freedoms, just as we, the people of the United States, cherish ours. We need to be four square behind those seeking to throw off the ideas of totalitarian rule. While I do not expect and do not hope for any kind of violence between U.S. forces and Chinese forces, it is my sincere hope that while the UN is worried about one mistake leading to a nuclear conflict, it is my hope that the people of the United States make sure that their leaders know that Taiwan is more important than cheap goods from a totalitarian society that steals its technology instead of developing on its own, simply because they don't trust the people to do it. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Please, by all means, debate what you hear, whether it's news or whether it's commentary. Please, by all means, share yours. China is very displeased with the arrival of Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi within minutes of her arrival in Taiwan on Tuesday night. China said it would immediately begin a series of joint military operations around the island, including long-range live ammunition in the Taiwan Strait. Rest assured, the USS Ronald Reagan and its task force will be watching those exercises with great interest. An announcement from the People's Liberation Army Eastern Theater Command said beginning Tuesday night, a series of exercises would be held in the sea and in the air surrounding Taiwan, the self-governed island that China says is its sovereign territory. This action is a solemn deterrent against the recent major escalation of the negative actions of the United States on the Taiwan issue, and a serious warning to Taiwan independence and those independence forces seeking independence, said Colonel Shi Yi. He's a spokesperson for the Eastern Theater Command in a statement. The Eastern Theater is one of the 5 joint commands of the People's Liberation Army, with jurisdiction over China's eastern coastal provinces of Fujian and Zhejiang, which sit opposite and above Taiwan. China's defense ministry said the PLA was on high alert and would launch a series of targeted military operations to counteract the situation, resolutely defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity, and resolutely thwart the interference of external forces and Taiwan independence secessionist schemes. In an unusual move, Chinese media posted on Twitter a map showing 6 areas around Taiwan where it said the PLA would conduct drills, including live-fire exercises, from Thursday through Sunday. That may not necessarily be as unusual as people think. The People's Republic of China, mindful of the USS Ronald Reagan, is staying out of their way, and they should. The announcement came after the U.S. Air Force, an Air Force plane carrying Pelosi, landed in Taiwan's capital of Taipei, making the first time a House Speaker has visited Taiwan in 25 years. China did not specify what exercises would entail and what units would be involved. The PLA has been active with exercises around the region. In the days leading up to the Pelosi visit, it typically stages drills at this time of the year to mark Army Day, the founding of the People's Liberation Army. Pelosi and the congressional delegation that accompanied her said in a statement the visit honors America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy. Our discussions with Taiwan's leadership will focus on reaffirming our support for our partner and on promoting our shared interests, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. The House Speaker wrote an op-ed that was published in the Washington Post after she landed, arguing that her trip demonstrated the U.S. commitment to Taiwan under threat from China. In the face of the Chinese Communist Party's accelerating aggression, our congressional delegation's visit should be seen as an unequivocal statement that the United States stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom. The U.S. supplies Taiwan with defensive weaponry under the terms of a decades-old Taiwan Relations Act, but it remains deliberately vague on whether it would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. That's a policy known as strategic ambiguity. China's ambassador to the U.S., Qin Gang, told CNN's John King that Beijing was within its sovereign rights to take action over Pelosi's visit. China has every right to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are fully justified to do what we must. The current situation is created purely by the U.S. side, so of course, it has to bear the responsibilities. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense said 21 Chinese warplanes made incursions into its air defense identification zone. That happened today on the day of Pelosi's arrival. The incursions were made by 10 J-16 fighter jets, 8 J-11 fighter jets, 1 Y-9 electronic warfare aircraft, 1 Y-8 electronic intelligence aircraft, and 1 KJ-500 airborne early warning and control aircraft. Getting mighty exciting over there, isn't it? Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We are covering Nancy Pelosi's arrival in Taiwan. She's there today. The Chinese are very upset about it. They have threatened a military live fire exercise that would virtually encircle the country of Taiwan. There is a small fly in the ointment. Actually, it's a very large fly in the ointment. It's the USS Ronald Reagan and its carrier strike group. China has long been feared to launch what could be a D-Day style amphibious assault on Taiwan. That was something that most analysts call Z-Day. At least 2 Chinese warships, a destroyer and a frigate, have been seen lurking off the island. Chinese warplanes have buzzed close to the dividing line in the Taiwan Strait. Chilling footage shared on Chinese social network Weibo appears to show a column of amphibious tanks reportedly massing on beaches in Fujian along the Taiwan Strait. Other footage shows large amounts of military equipment on the move in the province, including tanks on trains and columns of vehicles gridlocking Xiamen. The closest point between China and Taiwan is the Kinmen Islands, which are about 6 miles east of Xiamen. It's also reported that China is preparing to send its aircraft carriers, they have 2, to match U.S. deployments in the region. The USS Ronald Reagan and her strike group currently operates near Taiwan on the east side. Chinese state media reports that both 66,000-ton characters Liaoning and Shandong are now at sea. They should keep their distance. Chinese state media also says that there is a vow by communist leader Xi Jinping to unify Taiwan, which enjoys strong support from the U.S., even though the White House has stopped short of backing their independence. It's always been unclear whether Washington would intervene militarily should China attack Taiwan, despite a recent vow from U.S. President Joe Biden. Even the prospect of a visit has sparked a crisis which could spiral into a war, with China warning their military will not sit idly by and threatening serious consequences. China views any engagement between Washington and Taiwan's capital, Taipei, as a U.S. endorsement of the island's independence. The U.S. side will bear the responsibility and pay the price for undermining China's sovereignty and our sovereign security interests, said Foreign Ministry spokesman Hua Chunying at a press briefing in Beijing. Both China and Taiwan have been holding war games in the days ahead of Pelosi's trip. Her plane reportedly has now taken off, or it did take off, from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and was bound for Taiwan. The world waits with bated breath to see what will happen as China is once again moving their military to deploy. Specifically, that deployment includes perhaps confronting or at least matching the deployment of the USS Ronald Reagan and big deck amphibious ship USS Tripoli, with Marine F-35B Lightning II Joint Strike Fighters embarked. They're operating in the vicinity of Taiwan on the edge of the South China Sea ahead of a Western Pacific visit from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. A Pentagon spokesman told USNI News, which is where we're getting this copy, that the ships were operating normally in the region, would not detail force protection measures for the visit of the third highest ranking U.S. official in the region. However, a senior defense official told USNI News the ships, escorts, and their air wings already in the region were prepared to linger as a contingency option. Yesterday, Beijing implied there would be a military response if Pelosi traveled to Taiwan. We should know more about that later today. China has serious concerns over Speaker Pelosi's potential visit to Taiwan, which is now a reality, and our firm opposition to the visit. We've been stressing that such a visit would lead to serious consequences. We want to once again make it clear to the U.S. side, the Chinese side is fully prepared for any eventuality, that the People's Liberation Army of China will never sit idly by, and we will make resolute response and strong countermeasures to uphold China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Japan-based Reagan is in the Philippine Sea after transiting the San Bernardino Strait following a port visit to Singapore and operating in the South China Sea. California-based Tripoli is just south of Okinawa. Tripoli has been embarked with up to 20 F-35Bs. Marine officials told USNI News on Friday its F-35Bs were not grounded as part of the ongoing ejection seat problems. That was something that came up yesterday. There seems to be a problem with the Martin Baker ejection system, and many of the F-35s were grounded because of that, but apparently not these particular ones in this particular theater. Specific lots of ejection seats across the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, including F-35s, were found to have defective components. The services are in the process of clearing the seats for service with repairs. Marine Corps F-35Bs are not grounded. 90% of the inspections on Marine Corps ejection seat cartridges actuating devices are now complete. Okay. Now, there is a United States, it's the USS Antietam. That is a guided missile cruiser that would be able to pretty much take care of any problem that the Chinese Navy would seek to confront the USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group with. That is a serious capital ship, along with the carrier itself and its air wing. So the United States certainly has the wherewithal to be able to handle all of this, should China seek to create problems for the United States during the visit of Nancy Pelosi. Once again, we're doing the right thing, in my opinion. We need to confront China, because this may be one of the last times we have a chance to actually do so with a decided advantage. You need to make sure that you understand that the United States military, under fire for all kinds of policy things, is still very, very capable, and far more capable than the People's Liberation Army Navy. That's one of the things that China has a real problem with. They do have all the trappings of a superpower, but they don't have the ability to project that power, and they won't for quite some time. Anything that the Chinese would do to confront the United States of America, certainly at sea in a naval battle, would end disastrously for them and set them back years and years, and they know that. They may indeed deploy their aircraft carriers, sail them away from their docks, and put them to sea. That might happen. But they're not going to get within 250 nautical miles of the USS Ronald Reagan. And they're certainly not going to confront in any kind of bellicose warfare way that carrier strike group. I have been very concerned about the safety of Nancy Pelosi. It did not escape my attention that there was an article that talked about a possible assassination attempt. And that, of course, harkens back to Archduke Ferdinand, a leader of Austro-Hungary, I believe, that was killed, that touched off World War I. The Chinese are not ready for World War III. They simply are not. And remember, this USNI article talks about 4 ships. Well, those are the ones you can see. The ones you can't see, they're very busy right now. Because not only can you not see them, you can't hear them. And any undersea forces that have been the possession of China are very obvious on the targeting scopes of those submarines. They have no chance. Absolutely no chance. That doesn't mean they won't try. But I'm reasonably sure that if they do try to confront the USS Ronald Reagan, they're submerged ships, they're nuclear warships, that they will be dissuaded in no uncertain terms. And should anything happen on land, or anything happen that either interdicts United States forces or Taiwanese forces, I would expect a very strong and deadly message to be sent by some of those ships you cannot see, in a way that would be extremely effective and extremely, in my view, somewhat necessary. We might not ever have a chance like this again. China does have land-based nuclear ICBMs, but they don't have them in the numbers that would create enough of even a deterrent factor for the United States. I doubt very sincerely that they would make the top of their ballistic arc on their way to our country. Further, if they were to try to do something along that line, thinking that perhaps Russia might step up to the plate and try to do something about stopping the United States, they need to reevaluate. Russia would certainly love the landmass of Red China. If indeed the United States did intercede, creating at least a regime change, then that would be to Russia's benefit, and they know it. The question is, does China know it? Not sure. Absolutely not sure. The other wild card in this is North Korea. North Korea very silent these days. They certainly don't have the capability to interdict any U.S. forces, but they do have rockets. And they have fired them. And Taiwan is within range of their capability. China would have certain ideas about using North Korea as, say, for example, a Pascal goat, just as an opportunity to perhaps lure the United States into action. But I doubt it. The only thing that I can say at this particular moment is that the United States of America needs to stand for democracy and the free rule of independent people, independent of a totalitarian, socialist, communist, overarching government of doom. Nothing that government is going to be able to touch is going to improve. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's something that once again takes me back to the original points I made in this segment. A government needs to work to the benefit of its people. These government officials from the People's Republic of China have talked about how the people of China will absolutely not stand for any of this. There's only one problem with that. How would they know? The government of the Communist Party of China, they don't have any idea what the people of China think. And moreover, they don't care. And that's something that I have pointed out on several different occasions here in the United States. We have one political party that empowers the other, and the other political party operates in spite of the people of the United States, instead of to their benefit. We know that's true. This particular political party, now in power, took over a country that was energy independent. In this day and time, that is a national security issue. This is something that particular political party seems to ignore in their blind hope that they can force on the American people an economy that doesn't exist yet and destroy the one currently in place for the sake of their politics. All you need to do is look at the People's Republic of China and how they do their business and how they handle their country to see what these very same people that currently are doing their best to disassemble the greatest nation on earth, all you have to do is look at China to see what that future would be like. It's not one that I want my children to share, and it's certainly one I simply won't share. I won't have it. And neither should you. And protecting Taiwan is essential to that particular goal, in my view. Now, you have to understand that the United States of America was very, very upset about the Soviet Union's influence in Cuba. And these two islands off the coast of a major superpower are roughly analogous, in that you really don't want to have your arch enemy in the world occupying land very, very close to your country. The United States was successful in keeping the Soviet Union away from Cuba for the most part. And you can see why the People's Republic of China would want the United States as far away from Taiwan as humanly possible. But the one thing that I have brought up before, if China believes that they can essentially overrun Joe Biden, they may indeed act. It would be premature, but it may be something that they do anyway. And the question is, would the United States respond the way they should with Joe Biden as the commander-in-chief? This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Give us a call. Tell us what you think. Things are exciting in the South China Sea. China may indeed put its carrier groups to sea. We have not heard whether or not that's happened yet, but it would not necessarily be a bad idea. Thanks very much, Flem. I appreciate it. I thank you very much. And Alan, good to see you too. Alan Schaefer joining us on the chat. You can too. Feel free to check in at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. That would be a good thing. Speaking of the idea of jailing those people who disagree with you politically, A Texas militia member was sentenced to slightly more than 7 years in prison yesterday, the most severe punishment issued in a case related to the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. The sentencing came after a court jury in March delivered guilty verdicts on 5 criminal accounts, including obstruction against Guy Wesley Reffitt in the first jury trial to emerge from the government's far-reaching investigation of the attack. In an 11th hour attempt at an apology, Reffitt, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, stepped before a courtroom podium and offered a rambling, expletive-filled statement. Sometimes swearing is just plain dumb. I really do hate what I did, he told U.S. District Judge Dabney Frederick. My mouth is my biggest enemy. Yes. Under those circumstances, remember the Air Force fighter pilot credo. Never pass up a good opportunity to shut up. It's one I actually hold dear. I know I talk for a living, but still, I know the difference between things I should say and things I do say. I wish he did too. Before announcing the sentence, Frederick described the former oil field worker's unusual expression of remorse as awfully late. Here he sits and has yet to say what he did was wrong. He has not walked back his comments about being a martyr. It's really disturbing that he repeatedly persists with these views. To this day, he has not disavowed these comments. He's in a class of his own. It's really troubling. This is one case where words could help him in some way. Ultimately, the judge imposed a sentence that had added 2 years to the longest previous term. Frederick earlier denied the government's request for an enhanced sentence, casting Reffitt's crimes as act of domestic terrorism. Fredericks said such punishment had not been sought in other Capitol riot cases. Defense attorney Clinton Broden said the government's request makes a mockery of the criminal justice system. Yeah. Broden had cited more lenient sentences in the case of rioters who had assaulted police officers. Reffitt was not charged with such offenses. For the government, the verdicts marked a successful first test of evidence and witnesses before a jury whose members were drawn from neighborhoods in close proximity to the Capitol, which had been transformed into a battlefield on January 6th. Please keep in mind this is USA Today this is US Today copy, and so USA Today has a tendency to stretch things just a bit. Believe me, I've seen battlefields. Washington, D.C. wasn't anywhere close. The case against Reffitt, a member of the paramilitary 3%ers, prosecutors drew on real surveillance video, testimony from Capitol police officers, a fellow militia member, and the defendant's estranged son to portray a rioter described as the tip of this mob's spear. Reffitt's son told prosecutors that his father warned against reporting his actions to authorities, saying traitors get shot. By the way, that same son agrees with the sentencing. Reffitt, prosecutors said, planned to use his excursion to D.C. for days, then plunged into a crowd with a handgun holstered to his waist while talking of physically removing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. For those people that are militia-minded, I would like to make a small suggestion. Even though it is your constitutional right to keep and bear arms, when you go to the Capitol of the United States, a place infected with leftist craziness, you might want to, instead of actually carrying weapons, you might want to carry the Constitution and an American flag instead. You just might want to do that. I also have to point out this. I have yet to hear anybody who has created far more violent moments in the United States of America, say, for example, the riot-filled summer of 2020. I've yet to hear situations where those people have gone to jail for 7 years. I'm waiting. I also want to point something else out. I have not heard of anybody carrying weapons on the Capitol grounds during January 6th. Which, by the way, if the BLM riots were peaceful protests, most certainly that was the case for the Capitol riot. Anyway, I've not heard about that, and I have reported on this broadcast that there wasn't anybody carrying weapons. Obviously, that's incorrect. And I want to make sure that you understand that I will redouble my efforts to make sure that in the future that I am aware of what has been going on and the things that I report. But please understand, in all the things that I've been looking at since I realized that this guy was armed, I haven't heard anything beyond a knife or two, etc. This is the first opportunity I've heard of someone carrying a handgun. Don't carry handguns when you go to Washington, D.C. Carry the American flag and the Constitution. And don't show up with 100,000, 150,000 people. Show up with millions. Encircle the entire city and sing the national anthem. Believe me, it would be effective. This is the Wells Report. And we shall be back coming up in just a little minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news. We analyze the news for fact. We make commentary. We debate. It's what we do here. Tell your friends about this show because real news lives here. And we live here every single day, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. This is a very big day from an electoral standpoint. It is a primary day for 5 states. Those states are Michigan, Arizona, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington State. It pits Donald Trump versus non-Trump Republicans, Donald Trump versus Mike Pence, Democrat infighting and interference in GOP primaries, and post-Roe life in the United States. These are among the chief issues in primaries that will help decide what party wins control of Congress and governor's offices in November. 5 states host primaries: Michigan, Arizona, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington. There will be a lot of Trump on the ballot, said Henry Olson, a polling analyst and senior fellow with the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Here is a quick review, according to USA Today, of the contests. 2 themes have run throughout the election year in Michigan: congressional Democrats opposing each other because of redistricting, and Democrat organizations helping Trump-endorsed candidates, presuming they would be easier to beat in the fall. Representative Peter Mayer, one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump after the insurrection, what USA Today calls an insurrection. I say it's a peaceful protest. Just my opinion. He faces Trump-backed primary challenger John Gibbs, a former assistant secretary at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the recipient of Democrat help. The Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, funded an ad that attacked Gibbs as too conservative, which could increase his appeal to Trump voters in the GOP primary race with Meyer. Hoping that Trump-backed candidates are easier to beat in general elections in the fall, Democrats tried similar tricks in Illinois, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. In another race in Michigan, 2 Democrat incumbents run against each other in a newly created U.S. House district, Representative Andy Levin and Haley Stevens. The race underscores the friction between liberals and more moderate Democrats. Levin brought in former far-left presidential candidate Bernie Sanders to campaign for him. Let's hope that the Democrat voters in Michigan, having lived through leftist Gretchen Whitmer as governor, realize that this is a bankrupt political philosophy. Let's hope they don't send another socialist candidate to Washington, D.C. One issue that can make the difference is Israel. Stevens received millions of support from the United Democracy Project, a political action committee created by the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. In Arizona, it pits President Trump against former Vice President Mike Pence. The Republican gubernatorial primary could be seen as a proxy battle between Trump and Pence, former running mates who might oppose each other for the 2024 presidential nomination. Trump backs Kari Lake, a former news anchor who agrees with Trump's claims of voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election and vowed to change state election laws if elected. By the way, that wasn't in the original copy from USA Today. This is where I point out bias. The original copy said that Kari Lake, who agrees with Trump's false claims of voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Once again, let's talk a little bit about that 2020 election, just briefly. What I want to point out here is that, once again, you really don't have to sell the truth. People understand what is true and what isn't. Okay? That isn't. I mean, people understand what is and isn't. And when you say things in your news copy like false assumptions or evoke the big lie or any number of other things, what you're doing is you're damaging yourself. The Democrats are damaging themselves with this, and so is the mainstream media. The simple aspect of all of this is, look, we do not know And the questions are very basic, and we haven't addressed them yet. Will we? I don't know. It's one of those things where the problem has been made to be so big that the solution might be, in the eyes of some weak-kneed politicians, more dangerous than just letting it go as the status quo. And that's basically where we find ourselves here. But once again, we have questions about the 2020 election. Now, Langston is here, and Langston says, we know you won't accept the 2020 election. It's not my call. I accept the 2020 election. Joe Biden is the president of the United States. But that does not mean that there wasn't miscreancy in that election. And we simply don't know. You don't know. I don't know. None of us knows. And a lot of that is by design. And I brought that up on this broadcast before. But whether I accept the 2020 election is moot. The people of the United States chose Joe Biden. That was the official result of the election. But let's make this abundantly clear. What I'm looking at isn't necessarily whether or not Trump won or Biden won. Biden won. What I'm looking at is, once again, we have not confronted the very basic questions, the very basic anomalies which have existed in the 2020 election. And what does that mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Well, it means that if people can get away with miscreancy in voting and so on, they'll do it again. And for those people that say, my God, that was the greatest election in the history of the United States. Sure it was. You're talking through your hat because you don't know. None of this adds up. And once again, it will only be a matter of time before you're arguing about whether your vote was counted instead of the people who believe that theirs was not. All I have to do is wait. All I have to do is wait on this. That's all I have to do. And so do you. And we'll see. We shall see. So the ex-president and ex-vice president also went against each other in Georgia in May. Pence backed incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, who easily defeated Trump-supported challenger David Perdue. The Arizona Republican Senate features Trump-backed Blake Masters, a venture capitalist who echoes Trump's conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. Actually, I don't have any problem with that paragraph. I mean, they can be what Donald Trump thinks about the election and things that he said can be dismissed as a conspiracy theory. It can, right up to the point where it's no longer a theory and becomes simply a conspiracy. Again, we will see. Democrats expected Masters would be the easiest candidate to beat in a race with incumbent Senator Mark Kelly. Arizona is a crucial race in the fight for control of the Senate. Split 50-50 between the parties. Democrats control the chamber because of a tie-breaking vote from Vice President Kamala Harris. The interesting thing about that is that you also are not seeing any kind of reporting about the amazing reversal of policy by President Biden with regards to the Arizona border wall. The Arizona border wall has gaps that were notoriously left open as soon as President Biden took office. The disaster of the border, simply people from other countries overrunning our border security, which is simply non-existent, put Mark Kelly, the Senate candidate for the Democrat Party, in such a fix that he went to the president and said, you've got to close this border wall. And a president who said that he was not going to allow one more foot of fence to be built has decided to build the rest of the border fence there. That is instructive. Because what that is an absolute admission that what happened regarding the border and Biden border policy is wrong. And President Biden, with his help from the mainstream media, realizes that he's in a position where the political damage of him reversing himself will be less than losing control of the United States Senate. And that's why he made the decision. Again, just my opinion. Missouri, a show me state showdown running in the Republican Senate primary is former Governor Eric Greitens, who resigned in 2018 amid allegations of sexual assault and campaign fundraising issues. Pursuing the Trump vote, Greitens ran ads which he held a shotgun and urged voters to take out Republicans in name only, or as he put it, rhino hunting. Dude. He also is an underdog. Greitens started failing in pre-primary polls after his ex-wife issued a statement detailing allegations of domestic abuse, which he denied. Surveys give the Republican lead to a more traditional candidate, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt, U.S. Representative Vicky Hartzler, another Republican seeking to fill the seat vacated by Republican Roy Blunt. Trump waited until Monday evening of this week to make an endorsement in the Missouri Senate race. In a written statement, the ex-president said he's confident Missouri voters can make up their own minds. I'm therefore proud to announce that Eric has my complete and total endorsement. He did not say whether that meant Eric Schmitt or Eric Greitens, but in separate tweets, both candidates said they were honored to have Trump's support. he's learning politics, isn't he? President Trump is learning politics, isn't he? That was amusing. At least I thought so. The winner of the GOP Senate Republican primary will be favored over who emerges from a crowded Democrat field. In Kansas, candidate elections look pretty pro forma, but the Sunflower State's primary features is a referendum that will test the salience of an intensely revived issue, that abortion. Kansans will vote on whether to change the state constitution and allow the legislature to outlaw abortion. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, a decision in 1973 that established abortion as a constitutional right. Again, this is bias on the USA Today. It didn't establish a constitutional right. You have to do that by a constitutional amendment. You can't do that in the Supreme Court of the United States, which, absent any kind of confirmation or affirmation of the hysteria from the Democrat Party on this particular issue, all they did was return the Supreme Court of the United States to the judicial branch instead of the legislative branch. Democrats count on elimination of the constitutional right to an abortion to energize their political base and produce victories. Is there something wrong with that? Is there something wrong with a country that is submerged in huge inflation and economic trauma, with gasoline through the roof, food getting more and more hard to come by at a reasonable price? And what they're talking about is they're talking about abortion. What does that tell you about the intellectual honesty or the intellectual acumen of the Democrat Party? I think it speaks volumes. They need to stick to politics and leave all of that other stuff alone. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. How about you float us a like and maybe send this broadcast to some of your friends. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact. We comment. That's not news. We debate. It's what we do, and you can do it on chat. By all means, take part in it. We would appreciate it. There's also something else going on in the primary elections today among 5 different states. It marks the biggest one-day electoral test so far for 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Donald Trump. 3 of them are on the ballot today: Representative Jaime Herrera Butler and Dan Newhouse of Washington State, Peter Meijer of Michigan. They will find out whether they will survive primary challenges from Trump-backed opponents, as outside groups have rushed millions into their races. Freshman Meijer faces the most peril. Not only does the grocery chain Scion have a difficult primary against John Gibbs, a former housing and urban development official under the Trump administration, but his district also became more Democrat-leaning during redistricting, making him vulnerable all around. Herrera Butler and Newhouse also face stiff competition in their primaries, but their state's nominating system takes the top 2 finishers from an all-party contest, offering them some advantage on getting to the November ballot. If they survive their primaries, both should have a smooth re-election in the fall in their very solid GOP seats. Offering a sense of electoral hazard for Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump, 4 of the 10 opted not to run for re-election. One so far, Tom Rice of South Carolina, has lost his primary. One survived an all-party primary. That's for California Representative David Valadao. And Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney will face voters August 16th in a race where she has become the underdog to a Trump-backed challenger. Tuesday's primaries could confirm an emerging trend. Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump either don't seek re-election or lose in traditional primaries. This according to Nathan L. Gonzalez, CQ Roll Call's elections analyst, in an email. Pro-impeachment Republicans who have the luxury of running in states with non-traditional primaries, don't have to rely on support from base GOP voters, have a chance to survive. Good news for Herrera Butler and Newhouse, bad news for Meijer and later Liz Cheney. Meijer, who was the only freshman Republican to vote for impeachment, has significantly outraised Gibbs, enjoys high name recognition in the district. Still, Gibbs has seized on Meijer's impeachment vote against Trump and other votes within the House Democrat majority. I don't know why I said that. Gibbs' campaign has circulated polling showing him with a lead in the 3rd district primary that grew when likely Republican voters learned about Trump's endorsement. Meijer's allies have sought to tighten the race. Outside groups, including one with apparent ties to his family, have spent at least $3 million supporting his campaign, opposing Gibbs. Included in that spending was a $425,000 television ad buy from the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, appearing to be an attack on Gibbs by tying him to Trump, which could ultimately sway Republican voters to support him over Meijer. Principal leadership for Michigan countered with a similar-sized ad buy, calling Gibbs the Democrats' hand-picked candidate for Congress in the Republican primary. Primary winner is set to face Hillary Scholten, a former Department of Justice attorney who lost to Meijer by 6 points in 2020. She's running unopposed in the Democrat primary. So we're going to see a lot of things come tonight with regards to elections in these United States of America. The pictures will get closer. Speaking of people who have very difficult decisions to make, there's one from a senator in Arizona that has been getting an awful lot of scrutiny. And we'll find out more about that coming up in just a little bit here on the Wells Report. Telephone number again, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Back with more in a moment on the Wells Report. Thanks for being here on this Tuesday, the 2nd day of August. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you today. When I was a kid, I was about 11 at the time, a mighty Saturn V rocket left Pad 39A at something called Cape Kennedy. It's no longer called that. Back to Cape Canaveral. And those men aboard that rocket, there were three: Mike Collins, Edwin Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong, took off for the moon. That was the third Apollo mission. Apollo 8 circled the moon, proving that the navigation and all of the things that NASA engineers had figured out would actually work. It's funny. It would be years later when those astronauts said, we really only thought that we had about a 50-50 shot of making it back home. And the resilience of the Apollo project would make itself abundantly clear that the brilliance of the entire planning and the actual execution of those missions had thought of just about everything. Those rockets would leave very, very slowly, but they were the most powerful machines in the world at the time, harnessing so much energy. It was awe-inspiring. Apollo 4 was the first launch. The mainstream media had gathered in their small little trailers and so on and so forth, and not prepared for what was about to happen when that rocket left the pad. The whole building shook. Pictures fell off the floor, fell off the wall. Commentators were just amazed, and they backed up, as you might expect. What's fascinating is that we're about to do it again later this month. And the spectacle of hundreds of thousands of people showing up on Cape Canaveral to watch the launch will be something that we watch again. Sold out hotels, excitement that seems to grow by the day, the potential for hundreds of thousands of visitors, support staff, and more. Those are the factors being calculated in the preparations for Artemis 1, the first launch of NASA's Moon-focused Space Launch System rocket slated for August 29th. It's 322 feet tall. It promises to be the biggest, most powerful rocket to launch from Florida's Space Coast in years, bringing with it a level of excitement to match. All told, Space Coast officials are expecting a huge number of visitors for the rocket's first window, which includes opportunities on August 29th, September 2nd, September 5th, that's Labor Day. Currently, takeoff on October 29th is set, or that's T0, is set for 8:33 a.m. from Launch Complex 39B at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The rocket is part of the Artemis program, which aims to put human beings back on the moon sometime this decade. That starts with the uncrewed Artemis 1 mission, and it's planned to take an Orion capsule on a 4 to 6 week journey to the moon and back. Artemis 2 will do the same with astronauts, and then Artemis 3 will put 2 astronauts on the surface sometime after 2024. A 4 to 6 week journey, huh? It took days before. The Space Coast isn't a stranger to launch day crowds. During the space shuttle era that ran through 2011, 500,000 or more visitors would sometimes flood the area, scooping up hotel rooms and packing local businesses. Since then, crowds have been smaller, but still significant. Even during the height of the coronavirus pandemic, thousands still flocked to Florida's Brevard County to see the launches. Some of the recent SpaceX Crew Dragon launches, which take astronauts to the International Space Station from KSC, Kennedy Space Center, have drawn between 100,000 and 250,000 visitors, according to Peter Kranis. He's the executive director of the Space Coast Office of Tourism. It wouldn't be a stretch to expect more than that for Artemis 1. I think the crewed launches and these Artemis launches are going to be of equal interest to people. I would certainly expect over 100,000, if not more, coming for that. Just glancing at hotel room listings show a rapidly dwindling supply among those who have not been sold out. The space-themed Courtyard by Marriott Titusville, Kennedy Space Center, for example, is one of the area's newest hotels. Completed this year, open to the public in April, it boasts views of KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and has a rooftop space bar specifically for launch viewing. Smart. All the Courtyard rooms, along with the space bar, are sold out for Artemis 1. Spectators are not the only visitors expected for the Space Coast. Hundreds of media members from around the world have signed up to cover the liftoff as well. I'd love to be there, but I can't go. KSC's public affairs team confirmed at least 700 media have signed up so far, a figure that dwarfs typical launches and closer to crowds seen during the Space Shuttle program. Heather Scott, a spokesperson for Space Force Space Launch Delta 45, said the military branch will also be pitching in to help manage the media. A growing sense of energy and excitement has been steadily building around Kennedy and among our workforce for the last year. It's tangible, said Mike Bolcher. He's director of KSC's Exploration Ground Systems. A sense of anticipation is growing daily as we close in on launching this amazing rocket and spacecraft. From an employee perspective, launch day passes, car passes can be used to bring personal vehicles, family, and friends. They're highly sought after. You might remember the people literally lined up on the beach, Cocoa Beach, with their cars and watching these launches. It's not just about launch day viewing. Employees not directly working on Artemis have been handling non-critical items for those who are, even going so far as to buy their lunch to help free up time. The excitement across the center is palpable, said KSC Director Janet Petro. You can see it in people's faces. You can hear it in their voices. And we all stand together with our eyes on the sky. Launch day, I don't think there's going to be a feeling in the world like it. If the Space Launch System is unable to fly during the first window in late August into early September, teams have several more opportunities through the end of the year. Though a delay from the initial window will mean having to roll the SLS and Orion back to the vehicle assembly building for more work, which could mean shifts to other launch opportunities in October, November, or December. I'm pretty sure this one's going to fly. Some of the details. There was an idea because of the Kennedy Declaration that we would send men to the moon in this decade, talking about the 60s through 1970. When he made that, there were some decisions made that would change the way NASA does business. One of them was what was called the all-up mission test, where all the spacecraft's pieces would be tested at the same time, instead of breaking them down into first stage tests, second stage, third stage, et cetera, et cetera. They did it all at once. Apollo 4 was very much like Artemis 1 in that it was an unmanned mission that tested the systems out. And nothing happened. There were Apollo 6, I believe, there was an interesting malfunction of one of the engines on the first stage, the Boeing built first stage, that shut down one of the engines because of a wiring mistake. The computer noticed that the engine was off and turned it off with a command. Unfortunately, the wires from the computer that made that decision went to the wrong engine, which shut down two of the engines in the first stage. The rocket flew parallel to the Earth for a while, and then as the engines gimbaled, it finally lifted itself into orbit. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. It managed to get to Earth orbit on 3 engines instead of 5. The Space Launch System has uprated shuttle engines, which are amazing, RD-25s. They will have a couple of solid rocket boosters on each side, and it is on par with the Saturn V. It ought to make a lot of noise. It ought to make a lot of noise. And it will very likely do just fine. I'm curious about the 4 to 6 week time frame to get to the moon and back. I don't think that's correct. I could be wrong. We'll see. There's a website called Auto Evolution that says if you're too young to be a baby boomer, you grew up in an era where global space programs spent decades stuck in the proverbial purgatory of low Earth orbit. You know, the ISS, International Space Station, and the Shuttle series. To a certain set of people, no amount of space telescopes, space stations, overly expensive reusable space shuttles would make up for not having another person standing on the moon. If you haven't been paying attention, we understand if you haven't, says Auto Evolution. Artemis 1, the first launch of a spacecraft system built for the purpose of interplanetary travel, is set to launch on its first uncrewed test flight August 29th, followed by a crewed circumnavigation of the moon, following the same path as the first mission due in the preceding 24 months. The space race is back on for real this time. It's time for the next generation of Americans to put their boots down on the surface of another heavenly body since the Apollo 17 mission, the last in the Apollo series, departed the lunar surface in 1972. Using the NASA Space Launch System, constructed with a great deal of repurposed and upgraded shuttle technology, the Lockheed Martin Orion Command Module, Airbus ESA Service Module will launch on SLS's first live test for a 25-day trip into lunar orbit. So I guess it is going to be a while. Why would they take so long, I wonder? That's going to be a translunar injection burn, and then they'll send it back home. From there, scientists will closely study the vital spacecraft systems that have to work flawlessly for a manned lunar landing to be feasible. If it all goes according to plan, if all goes well in the parlance of NASA back in the day, a joint American-Canadian mission to land on the lunar surface via the Gateway Lunar Space Station may be reached by 2025. For those of us who have been waiting for our entire lives for this day to arrive, we think we can stomach waiting a few more years. It would be impossible to tell the story of Artemis 1 without explaining the 5-decade-long gap between NASA moon missions. It's been said that had the Nixon administration not cut all NASA funding apart from a few space probes and the Space Shuttle program, NASA's space architect Wernher von Braun could have devised a mission to take mankind to Mars by the early 1980s using Apollo technology. That would have been a very long trip in a very, very small craft in comparison to the Orion spacecraft. That spacecraft can take 7 people, which is the same size as the crew for the space shuttle. What people don't understand is the U.S. had a working nuclear fission engine undergoing testing in the 1960s as a potential power source for a manned mission to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Called the Los Alamos Laboratory NERVA engine, but because the White House short-sighted and neglectful stance toward the space program, Americans and the entire world as a result have been shackled to Mother Earth for half a century. Congress canceled the space shuttle program, wrapped up, and the NASA Constellation program in the early 2010s. It appeared that the era of manned space travel beyond Earth's orbit was well and truly gone. But to those people who were too young to see Apollo, too young to remember a time when Americans were capable of Herculean feats of engineering, Artemis possesses the potential to give younger generations their defining signature moment. A luxury baby boomers have had for decades. So if you're still under the illusion that the American space program is dead, let us refer you to the giant orange and white rocket ship sitting inside NASA's vehicle assembly building. This isn't the early 2000s anymore. It's time American youth stood up and recognized their time of triumph might be upon them. The time has come to seize the moment, just as our grandparents did a half century ago. In doing so, the dream of our very one giant leap for mankind may finally be in sight. But it's not time to rejoice just yet. Still plenty of work to be done. There is an awful lot to do. There's an awful lot to do. As you may know, I was raised in the Space Center in the Space Agency family. It was a lot of fun. It was really good. And bad. I'll never forget the look in my dad's face when the Challenger 7 died. That pretty much ended his career. He hung on for a while and then decided that he had had enough. Remember asking him about what was the worst part. And he said, sweating out those GD countdowns. I said, what was so bad about those? He looked at me in the face and said, because the damn thing might blow up. That was before Challenger. I think that haunted him his whole life. You are listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. As I have said, I was a space agency kid. I got to see all of those incredible missions, from some of the Mercury missions to Gemini to Apollo and the space shuttle. All of that was forefront in my mind. It was amazing, just amazing to see all that incredible work. The guys who did that were tough customers. They really were, especially Wally Schirra. Wally Schirra was a tough guy. And he hated what happens to NASA, and I don't understand where it started or why it actually happens, but it's what I call cutesyism. Cutesyism. People will do amazing things when it comes to space flight, Elon Musk, famously in the test of the Falcon Heavy rocket, which is a rocket that he wants to send to Mars, sent his Tesla Roadster into space. It's still up there with a spacesuit-clad mannequin at the wheel. It's floating around in space. I hope nobody runs into it on the way to Mars. I'm just hoping. But cutesyism is, at least, I mean, that wasn't cute. That was kind of, there's a lot of panache in that. I kind of liked it, actually. I mean, I've owned a car or two that I would like to send into space forever. Anyway, NASA is getting ready for Artemis 1, and cutesyism has infected the flight, specifically in the name of Shaun the Sheep. This is a famed stop-motion animation British TV character. This particular sheep will be aboard the first flight of the new space launch system to kick off the Artemis program, which will eventually return astronauts to the surface of the moon. Artemis 1 will be an uncrewed mission that will send NASA's Orion spacecraft with an ESA service module. That's the European Space Agency, responsible for putting Shaun the Sheep in the capsule. Cutesyism. He will be there. The plush, woolly toy astronaut will have an epic view of the cosmos all to himself. The mission will see Orion and Shaun fly almost 500,000 kilometers. That's 311 miles from Earth, which is further than any human being or stop-motion animation character has ever traveled. They put Shaun the Sheep on a parabolic flight zero-G simulator, colloquially known as the Vomit Comet. So he was floating around and got some video. More cutesyism. Artemis is set to launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida as soon as August 29th. NASA's Space Launch System has been subject to many years of delays that have seen an entire commercial space agency, led by SpaceX and Elon Musk, blossom and fill the vacuum in the interim. I'm looking forward to seeing people on the moon again. I am. I thought that by now, we would be looking up at the moon and seeing the lights of Armstrong City. I really had thought we'd be seeing that by now. And it's sad. And it's sad. It's sad. I'll tell you why I'm laughing in a minute. It's sad that we don't do that. Our kids will. Our kids will be able to look up at the moon, and they will see people living up there. And that will be good. What's funny is Jeff says, hey, look, this isn't the 60s anymore. Most of us know that the moon landings were faked. Yeah, okay. Okay, Jeff. That's okay. Whatever you choose to believe. Okay. Those missions were not faked. They were not. The idea that we sort of spoofed the entire world has actually been debunked by people other than the people of the United States. It's not a big conspiracy theory. We actually went. We actually did. And we're going to go again. I always wanted to go. I always did. I wanted to fly in one of those spacecraft, and I wanted to touch my boots on lunar surface sand. But, even if I had been on that track, I would have been relegated to the space shuttle era because I would have retired from that long ago. So I missed my chance. My son, on the other hand, wants to be a mechanical engineer. I hope he pursues it. And I also hope he pursues the idea of going back to work for NASA and following in the footsteps of his grandfather. That would be cool. Because if he was actually in mission control, running one of those consoles, I'd be able to do something that I was able to do when my dad was sitting behind one of those consoles. Call him on the phone. Yeah. I think I told the story of Dad Luck. I was watching NASA Select, which was their television station at the time, and Dad was sitting there, and I go, "That's my dad." And the people at the television station I was working at the time said, That's not your dad." I said, "Watch," and I called him on the phone, and he goes, "Wells," and I go, "Dad, it's me," and he goes, "What?" I said, "I just wanted to show my television friends that you were sitting in a console, and this happened." I got Dad Luck. And everybody at the television said, "He is your dad." Have yourself a great one. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. And okie dokie. So I hope you enjoyed that show. Thanks very much for being with us today, and I will see you again tomorrow. God bless you.